Okay, let's dive in. If you've paid any attention to crypto, you probably wondered the same thing we have. How on earth does something like Bitcoin go from being worth, almost nothing, just cents,
Right.
to suddenly being worth tens of thousands of dollars? I mean, how does that massive shift happen?
It's a huge question. And looking through the sources we have, what's really interesting is they all kind of point back to one core idea,
Yeah.
something fundamental from like Econ 101.
Don't tell me. Supply and demand.
Exactly, the good old law of supply and demand. Simple on the surface, but absolutely key to unpacking this crypto volatility.
Okay, supply and demand. We hear it all the time. But applying it here in the crypto world, that feels different somehow. That's really what we want to get into in this deep dive, right? Use these sources to see how it plays out specifically with crypto.
Yeah, because it has these unique twists. And there's maybe no better way to kick this off than with that classic story.
Oh, you mean the pizza guy? Las Ohañas.
That's the one, 2010. He buys 2 pizzas.
2 pizzas, yeah. Paid for with 10,000 Bitcoin. Just try to wrap your head around that. Today, that same 10,000 Bitcoin, what is it, over $1 billion?
It's staggering. $1 billion, yeah, for 2 pieces.
Wild.
And that, right there, is what the sources use as the ultimate example.
Yeah.
It's this dramatic illustration of what happens when demand just explodes
Explodes, yeah.
against a supply that's not just limited, but is actually, in some ways, shrinking over time.
Okay, so the basic idea is the same as any market. Buy low, sell high, supply, demand. But crypto's got these unique features baked in. It's not like trading, I don't know, oranges or something.
Not at all. Let's talk about supply first. Because, unlike dollars or euros, where a central bank can just decide, hey, let's print some more.
Right, quantitative easing or whatever they call it. Can't do that here. This is more like programmed scarcity.
Programmed scarcity is a great way to put it. Most major cryptos, and Bitcoin's the classic example here, were literally designed with a maximum limit, a hard cap.
Like Bitcoin's 21 million coin limit.
Exactly. Only 21 million Bitcoin will ever exist. And we're already over, 19 million mined? So that inherent rarity, that sort of digital scarcity, is baked into the supply side from the get-go.
Okay, so fixed total supply, that makes sense. But you mention, and the sources seem to emphasize this too, that the available supply, the stuff people can actually trade, is somehow decreasing. That feels a bit weird. How does that work?
Yeah, it's a really crucial point. It happens mainly for a couple of reasons. One is pretty simple. People just lose access to their coins.
Like losing your keys,
Like-
password.
Exactly. Lose your private keys, forget your wallet password, hard drive fails. If you don't have backups, those coins are just gone, effectively locked away forever. Nobody can ever use them again.
Huh. And that's significant.
It really is. Some estimates suggest maybe like 4 million Bitcoin could be lost like that, just vanished from the accessible supply.
4 million. Wow. Okay.
And then you also have something called coin burning.
Burning, like deleting them.
Sort of. It's where coins are deliberately sent to an address that nobody has the keys for. Again, taking them out of circulation permanently. So you combine the lost coins with the intentional burning.
And the actual amount available to buy and sell keeps getting tighter.
Precisely. The usable supply is constantly shrinking, in effect.
Okay, wow. So it's incredibly tight, even shrinking supply. Let's flip it then. What about demand? The sources paint a picture of demand being, well, all over the place, super volatile. What causes those huge swings?
Oh, it's a whole mix of things. You've got, big news stories, major companies saying they'll accept Bitcoin payment, or maybe they won't.
Regulation news. That always seems to move the needle.
Huge impact.
Right.
Regulation, government actions, definitely. Then there's just pure speculation, hype cycles. But maybe the biggest driver, the sources really stress this, is just human psychology.
Ah, the old classics. Fear and greed.
Yep. Fear and greed are massive forces in this market. The sources bring up some good quotes to illustrate this.
Like that Robert Kiyosaki one about assets versus liabilities.
Right. Kiyosaki's point about rich people buy assets, poor people buy liabilities. The idea here, as the sources frame it, is that understanding supply and demand helps you see if something is potentially a real asset you should acquire, maybe when others are scared.
Versus just jumping on a bandwagon for something that's maybe hyped up and actually a liability waiting to collapse.
Exactly. And then there's the Warren Buffett classic.
Be greedy when others are fearful, and fearful when others are greedy. Always relevant.
Especially here. The sources use that to show how, market panic, extreme fear can just crush demand, maybe opening up buying opportunities if you believe in the fundamentals.
Right.
And conversely, when everyone's euphoric, when greed is rampant, demand might be artificially high, signaling maybe it's time to be cautious, right? It really captures the emotional roller coaster of the market.
And it's not just abstract psychology. We see specific scheduled events that play into this. The Bitcoin halving is probably the most obvious one.
Oh, absolutely. The halving is fascinating because it's a pre-programmed shock directly to the supply side.
How does it work again? The miner reward gets cut.
Exactly. Roughly every 4 years, the amount of new Bitcoin awarded to miners for processing transactions gets cut in half. So suddenly, the rate at which new coins are entering the market slows down instantly.
Less new supply hitting the market. And historically, the sources point out there's often been a big price run-up after a halving, hasn't there?
That's the pattern people point to. Less new supply meeting existing, or maybe even growing demand. Basic economics suggests the price should adjust upwards. And analysts like Walid Rafat mentioned in the sources, they also look at other data for clues.
Right, the on-chain stuff.
Yeah, Walid focuses on things like tracking how coins are moving or large amounts moving onto exchanges. That could signal people are getting ready to sell. More supply potentially hitting the market.
Okay, potentially pushing prices down.
Or are coins moving off exchanges into, like, private wallets, cold storage? That could mean people are planning to hold long-term, reducing the readily available supply.
Gotcha. So tracking those flows gives hints about supply and demand shifts. Okay, so putting it together, we've got this unique supply side, limited, shrinking, with these halving events reducing new flow. And that meets this incredibly jumpy demand, driven by news, adoption, speculation, and a whole lot of fear and greed.
Yeah.
But there's a catch, a big one the sources warn about.
A huge one.
Yeah.
You absolutely cannot ignore this part. They talk very clearly about, well, fake supply and demand.
Ah, yes, the whales, the big players.
Exactly, whales. These are individuals or groups holding enormous amounts of crypto. They have enough capital to potentially manipulate the market.
How? Like creating fake buzz?
They can. They can create artificial demand by placing huge buy orders, maybe coordinating to push the price up. That's the pump. It creates excitement, FOMO, fear of missing out, so smaller investors jump in.
So pushing the price even higher.
Right. And then once the price is inflated, the whales can dump their holdings, sell off large amounts, taking profits, and often crashing the price, leaving the later buyers holding the bag.
Ouch. And the sources had that story from Kareem, the trader, that really hammered this home.
Yeah, that was a vivid one. Kareem talked about a small altcoin, right? His price just exploded like 300% in a day or something crazy.
Based on what? Some big news?
Based on absolutely nothing. It was a completely false rumor about some major partnership that was supposedly happening. Total fabrication.
Yeah.
But the rumor spread. People saw the price chart going vertical.
FOMO kicked in hard.
Totally. People piled in, chasing the pump. And then, of course, the truth comes out. No partnership, just a rumor. And the price just collapsed instantly.
Wow.
Kareem called it a really harsh lesson. It shows how easily perceived demand can be just manufactured, especially with smaller, less established coins. Pure manipulation.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up. The core engine driving crypto prices fundamentally is supply and demand. That much seems clear from the sources.
Absolutely, but it's supply and demand with these really unique crypto-specific characteristics.
Right. You've got the supply side, fixed total amount, that digital scarcity, but also effectively shrinking because of lost coins, burning.
And punctuated by things like the halving, which directly cuts the flow of new supply.
And then that meets the demand side, which is just incredibly volatile, whipped around by news, adoption, regulation.
And heavily influenced by those deep human emotions, the fear and greed cycles we talked about, like Kiyosaki and Buffett highlighted.
Yeah. And we saw how specific events like the halving impact supply and how analysts try to read the tea leaves using on-chain data, like those exchange flows Walid Rafat looks at.
But crucially, we have to remember that warning about manipulation, the whales, the potential for fake supply and demand.
Remembering Kareem's story about that pump and dump built on literally nothing.
That's a harsh reality check. It's not always just pure market forces at play.
So, understanding all this, the limited supply, the volatile demand, the psychological swings, and the manipulation potential. The sources argue that's really essential if you're trying to navigate this space. It's supposed to help you, potentially spot real opportunities versus falling into those manufactured traps.
Yeah, it gives you a framework, at least.
Yeah.
Which, actually, the sources hint leads nicely into another topic.
Yeah.
Maybe for next time. The common mistakes beginners make in crypto.
Oh, that sounds like a good one. Definitely important.
For sure.
But it leaves us with a really interesting thought to ponder, doesn't it? Given how powerful manipulation can be, how much those whales can potentially skew things, and how strong those waves of fear and greed are.
Mhm.
How much can those factors actually override the fundamental economics of supply and demand, at least in the short term?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Or maybe the billion-dollar question now. What does it really mean for trying to apply classic economic models to something this new, this digital, this wild? Something definitely to keep thinking about as you watch this space unfold.